Hey Ty, how's it going?
Hey, Lucas, good. And finally doing an intro episode in our studio here, getting set up.
We made it after all this work. We got to the podcast stage.
That's right.
So probably introduce ourselves if we're gonna do a podcast. I guess, let people know who we are. So I'll go first because why not? So my name is Lucas Holtfluer. Kind of my background, I guess. I grew up across the country, lived in BC, Manitoba, and then for about the last 10 years or so here in Ontario. Holtfluer, you may recognize that last name. Yes, my father is a minister, Peter Holtfluer. So just to get that off the table right away. Kind of my background a bit. I spent a year in Parliament Hill working for Arnold Viersen, who's a member of Parliament, one of our Canadian Reform members of Parliament there, which was an awesome experience. Kind of launched me in the whole world of politics and media and cultural issues, and eventually that got into church issues and got me interested in this sort of podcast. So that's kind of where my trajectory went, I suppose. And then as far as meeting Ty here, so I went to school for 2 years, did a sales marketing program at Niagara College, and then Ty gave me a call one day and said, hey, I just started a company selling doors commercially. You want to get involved? And I said, sure, sounds like fun. So I've been doing that for the past year and a bit, and that's kind of led to all these conversations we've been having and our desire for a podcast.
Yeah, I guess so, eh? Just have our conversations and let other people listen to them.
Yeah.
Instead of just us listening to ourselves.
It's a little bit more than that, but we'll get into it.
Good stuff. So I'm Tyler Vanderwood. I grew up not around the country, but in the Hamilton area, in a Canadian Reformed church, Canadian Reformed schools, all the way through. Went to McMaster University in Hamilton also, so didn't travel a whole lot outside the Hamilton area. Got married pushing 5 years ago and moved even further into Hamilton, and now in church in Hamilton. Happily married, kid, another one on the way, and so I've been fairly less, I guess you say, exposed to the wide world than you have been, but a little more narrow. But
you got a couple of years on me though, so that's fine.
That's right. So I started getting interested in a little bit in politics and church issues and things like that. And I think I've always been on committees and things like this around the church community. And so when you came on board with the business, we started having conversations, and we noticed that maybe these conversations weren't being had. So I think that's kind of why we're here, and hopefully that's enough of an intro on myself, and you'll get to know us as we plug along here.
For sure. So why we started this podcast, basically, in light of all these different conversations we were having on church issues, we thought, hey, like, more people, especially our age, should be talking about these issues, but for the large part, that probably doesn't happen. So we wanted to make a platform where honest conversation could be had with subject experts coming on as guests to give us the goods, to give us the expertise.
Right.
Because, we don't pretend to be experts by any stretch, but we're always interested in having a good conversation and trying to see both sides as much as we can. And we're just interested in good conversations. So that's kind of where we want to make this podcast and create a platform for that. Yeah,
for myself, I think it stemmed mostly or a lot from myself not being a reader. Don't read a lot, so I don't readily pick up a magazine like the Clarion or Foreign Perspective or those magazine volumes that are sitting on your coffee table. It just never seems to happen, and I think that's probably a more common thing than we all care to admit. But but I have a lot more conversations, and I'm still really, really interested in what's being written. It seems like I never pick it up. So this seems to be like a good way to have good conversations with the people who are writing these articles, and also the people who are maybe should be writing those articles, and maybe glean some useful content. So
yeah, definitely. It's a challenge to read a lot, right? Like, I even like to do it myself, but you got to find the time for it too, right? You got to make the time for it. And I mean, the Clarion's in my house, and I'm interested in these topics, but unless I'm prompted, by my father or something to check this out,
Yeah, well, so you have somebody in your house who's doing this.
And even then, half the time I still don't do it. So I mean,
yeah, of course,
it's a medium thing. I'm convinced more than anything, because
Yeah.
I listen to a ton of podcasts, and so do you. And
Yeah.
both, for news and for entertainment and for cultural analysis and these sorts of things. So
yeah, and I'd encourage people to get into podcasts because it's just found time. Like we've talked about it a lot. Like
oh, totally.
you seem to listen to educational podcasts or even entertainment
Yeah.
while you're doing other things like the dishes, mowing the lawn, doing all sorts of stuff. So you can listen to people on 2 times the speed if they're talking really slow, and it's an amazing way to absorb information, and you don't have to sit down curled up on a couch and use an hour of your Sunday afternoon to read. You can be out golfing in your yard with some headbuds on in and listening to. So
no, exactly. It's and plus, so we didn't see a ton out there for Reform podcast. I mean, that's not to say there isn't. There's definitely a few out there which do a good job, but we thought just at least starting with our own Canadian Reform community here, and hopefully branching out to the broader Reform community, that there's definitely some room for a lot of these conversations that are being had in the various magazines that are out there right now, with the Clarion and Reform Perspective obviously moving online. And we'll touch on Reform Perspective later in this episode, just to give you the backstory and how we got connected with them and that sort of thing. But yeah, a lot of these conversations are being had in the pages of these magazines, which is great. But there's a lot of people our age and who are just not engaging with this content. And if we want to be prepared for to be the leaders of tomorrow and to be informed, we need a space to do that. So we're hoping to make Real Talk that space for honest conversation and for informed conversation. And maybe we can get into kind of the 2 pillars of the podcast, perhaps, if you want.
Sure. Yeah. Let's do that, and then we'll touch on the name and explain kind of why we called it Real Talk.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So we have 2 main goals with the podcast, and I'm sure they will kind of evolve as we go along. But the two pillars that we kind of set out were to inform and also inspire in our conversation. So the inform, we're looking to have more educated guests on. We definitely don't claim to know half of what we should know, and definitely not enough to fill hours of content with different topics. But we're hoping to bring people on that we can ask good questions to, and to dig into different topics, and to help to inform the conversations of the our community and all our listeners. So so that's to inform. I don't know if you have anything to add to that one. And
yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Like, again, we're not the experts here. That's a tricky word. Keep tripping over that one.
Me too.
But gotta really enunciate when you're on the podcast. Anyways, back to the point at hand, though. So for informing people, again, it comes down to these experts, right? We want to be a voice for you, the listener, asking the questions that hopefully are on your mind. So a lot of that is going to be, us improving as we go along, obviously, but also building up a community around this podcast, and you giving us your feedback, and we'll get into that later and how you can do that and whatnot, whether through emails or through social media. But yeah, your feedback and your input, compliments, criticism, questions, ideas for guests, all those kind of things are going to be very important for making this project a success. So that's on the inform side, and then go ahead.
Then the second would be to inspire. And in inspiring, I mean, we found that there was a bit of a lack of a drive to have good conversations, especially among people of our age group. I don't know if I can group us both in the same age group.
I mean, he's kind of old,
but but I find that in our community, we often shy away from the conversations that need to be had in, and we maybe seem like we just let other people have these conversations in their magazines and not necessarily talk about them. But we hope to inspire people to have these conversations with their friends and their family, and to really understand why they hold the view that they hold, and then also why their friend holds maybe an opposing view, or just a little bit of a different nuanced view on certain issues. And I think that doing that will help bring people together actually instead of separating the
driving
separating
people
aside,
apart.
right?
And
And we don't often do that, and we don't often do that in a way like in the brotherly love that we should, right? And so that's what we're gonna hopefully inform your conversations, and then also that will help to inspire you to go out and have these conversations and also interact with us. So
yeah, I would say exactly right. It's about having those conversations that they can be challenging because they involve differences and differences in opinion and ways to do things, and it's not always going to come down to a right way or a wrong way for sure. But if we can have these sometimes difficult conversations on different directions a certain church is taking here or there, or certain schools doing here or there, or just kind of these issues that come up just in the course of daily living. And people are all different, man. They all have different ideas, and I mean, we all have scripture as the base, so that's obviously tremendously helpful in navigating debates and discussions, right? So, well, you can always come back to scripture, but yeah, there's going to be points where it's fine to agree to disagree, I think. So
yeah,
we look forward to having those discussions and to chatting with people about what they're up to. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So why don't we get into Real Talk? Why do we call it Real Talk?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the most creative name out there, but yeah, I mean, it's just, again, that the complete emphasis on having real, honest, authentic conversations. Like, I don't think there should be any issues we're really should be afraid to talk about as Christians, right? I mean,
for sure, right?
we have such a solid basis in the Bible, so we should be unafraid to tackle any issue of the day. Right. So, I mean, again, that's not us as experts or anything, but that's, again, in conversation with the experts.
Right, but it's also just a humility thing too, right? Like we have scripture as the basis, and we all agree, and that's where we go back to, and maybe we struggle to interpret scripture, and maybe we interpret it differently. Mm-hmm. But there's a level of humility that we think that we can bring to a conversation that maybe help bring two sides together, or have a good discussion that helps everyone understand. So
yeah, just to at least, again, to try to see both sides or multiple sides of an issue, whatever, right? Like there's just this room for nuance, room for discussion. And we want to be open to anybody to come on the platform and talk about issues of the day. So
Real Talk was we're having real conversations, not just the mindless chatter that is going on your social media feed,
that's a large part
and
of it.
Instead of necessarily wasting your time listening to who knows what all,
right? Just getting into back and forth comment wars on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, right? Like those aren't very productive at all, to put it positively as possible. And we think this medium of podcasting can be a lot more productive than that. Especially, again, to go back to the community point, with you guys and your input as listeners, that's going to make this thing work. That's going to make this thing take off, and that's going to make Real Talk a useful and important and engaging platform to learn from and to experience and to listen to, right? So I think that's really where we want to go with the name of Real Talk. So that's Real Talk. I guess let's talk about the structure of the podcast maybe. So again, we're kind of doing this as a side thing. Obviously, this isn't a paid gig or anything, so we're going to manage this as much as possible.
Nor is it in any way full time.
No. But I mean, again, if this goes really well and we get good feedback and good community feedback, this could definitely take on a higher frequency for sure. But
and that's not to say that we don't we will pour our heart and souls into this thing. We always want to be really well researched on our discussions, and
sure.
We will try as much as possible to do a lot of reading before we come on here and have conversations, and have a lot of conversations apart from the podcast where we can incorporate a few views from especially the listeners, and if we have conversations with the friends and families and so I think as far as structure goes, we're looking at like hour and a half, 90 minutes, whatever. I think that
once a month.
Yeah, once a month too. But I think the conversation, the important thing about maybe some people think that hour and a half is long. I think conversations are really don't take off in the first half hour. It's
takes
an
a while.
interesting, it's especially for those who are into podcasts and into that the medium. You'll find that once the half hour mark hits, roughly, usually the conversation deepens and you really get into maybe the meat and potatoes of the whole discussion, right? It's like you can talk surface level for a long time, but then at some point you get real with each other and you actually have some vulnerability and some deep conversation. So I think that's kind of like to the length of time, but
Totally.
maybe you can talk to like the structure of the month and
Yeah, so once a month, like we say, once a month we're gonna release a full length interview, an hour to 90 minutes, with our subject expert of the month. So our first one is going to be Jason Heemskirk. He's the principal at Guido de Bray Christian High School here in Hamilton.
He'll love that you called him a subject expert.
Yeah, well, we're gonna pump his tires up. We need him.
That's it.
It hasn't happened yet as of recording this, so we got to make sure it happens. But yeah, so we'll have Jason on the pod, which should be informative and probably entertaining, I would think as well.
Oh, yeah,
so
for sure.
It's a funny dude. So look forward to that, and so he's gonna be coming on. So once a month we'll be doing that, and then 2 weeks after that we'll do a follow-up podcast. This will be, I don't know, probably about 30 to 45 minutes, a lot shorter, about half the length or so maybe. And this will just be us following up on all the subjects that were touched upon in the previous podcast. So we'll go through with the guest and we'll get all the references, any scripture texts they talked about, any different books or literature they referenced, and we'll pull that stuff up so we can go through it. And this will also be an opportunity for anybody who came on. If they felt like, I didn't say that the way I wanted to, or I really need to clarify that point, then they can convey that message to us, and we'll put that out for the follow-up episode.
Right.
And obviously this is huge again, but this comes down to the audience. Your feedback will really define these episodes. It'll be us recapping and giving our thoughts, but your feedback with your comments or your questions or things you think we should address for next time, like all that kind of stuff, that's what's going to really make these episodes and help us grow as a community of people just interested in good-hearted, meaningful conversations. So that's what we're aiming to do. You can send us an email. We'll put all that info on our website and on our social media. And, of course, all that will be linked in the podcast description once that comes out.
Yep.
But, yeah, that's kind of the goal with that.
For sure. Yeah, maybe one note for the potential guests that we're going to have on. We've heard a little bit that guests are concerned that the discussion is having a conversation is tough because it really gets down to what you believe and then how well you can articulate that and so this format we really hope won't be a hindrance to people who would want to come out and share what they have been studying or what they're an expert at, because writing an article is very very much different, right? Like you usually sit down, you write a draft, you write a second draft, you maybe get it peer reviewed or looked at, and then you end up submitting something, and that is really a lot deeper than the conversation that we'll have on a podcast. So
yes and no, though, like deeper in the sense that
deeper in
it took a time.
Not necessarily deeper in content, but like maybe more dense, like deeper over a short period of time, I would say. Right, because it takes you.
It's higher quality.
It takes you
word
less
for word.
words, less words to say more things. Right, whereas conversation, like you can get the same place, and actually, it can be helpful because we can ask questions that the reader would be thinking reading the article.
Well, it's also a bit of an iron sharpens iron thing, right? Like I hear what you're saying on the written word, but you miss that opportunity in real time if you're not having a conversation, because the beauty of the conversation is that if you make a point and you were to write that out and you're like, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, like that's pretty solid. Yeah. And then of course you can do the whole back and forth thing, that's fine too, but that's a bit more stretched out and I don't find as conducive to getting to a point in the conversation where you're like, okay, I see where you're coming from there. That's the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Even if I don't agree with it, I fully understand where you're coming from.
Right, exactly.
Like, that's the goal, at least, right, as a baseline.
For sure.
So with conversation, you have that opportunity more and more.
Yeah, for sure. So it is a not an intimidating thing to come on and have a conversation because
This isn't gotcha journalism.
Exactly.
We're not trying to make life hard on anybody.
We're not going to be pulling sound bits out of our podcast and
No,
playing
no,
them
no.
all over. And that's not, that's not really in the spirit of what we're trying to do. So maybe that's just a word for potential guests and those listening maybe get a feel for what we're like.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this also comes back to also who we're partnered with, right? Like, we got this off the ground thanks to Reformed Perspective. So we came to them and we said, hey, we have this idea for a podcast. And they had been kicking around the idea to do a podcast too, which of course has now become reality. And you can check out Chris DeBoer doing his podcast too. That's all linked on their social media and whatnot. But so we pitched this idea to Chris. Chris liked it, went to the board. They were like, yeah, great. This is awesome. Have a go at it. So they put up the funds to make this all possible here in the studio. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today. So, yeah.
So big thanks to them.
Yeah, shout out to Reformed Perspective,
sure.
man. They came through clutch.
Yeah,
that was key for sure. So of course they also act as just as a check on what we're doing here to make sure
bit
we're
of a sounding board. Yeah,
we're staying in line and we're listening to our audience
but also pushing us and along with our audience, giving us good topics to talk
encouraging
about
us, giving us direction, that sort of thing too. So. Rest assured, this is not just two rogue guys just having a good old time. Although we're having fun, but we'll stay on topic, and these will be real conversations. They'll be serious conversations.
Yeah, it should be a lot of work, but it'll be a lot of fun. So
yeah,
hopefully the audience feels the same.
Yeah, hopefully you're willing to come along for the ride and give us a chance here, and yeah, we'll see what we can do. We promise to just be as honest and transparent as we can, and. I mean, we're humans. Obviously, we're going to have biases, but we'll do our best to try to represent both sides and have honest conversation because we shouldn't be afraid to take these issues on.
Oh, for sure.
We all have Scripture as our basis, and again, we can agree to disagree. We can have these conversations, but if we do this face to face in an honest, Christ-like, brotherly manner, we had nothing to fear.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like the best concluder there ever was to a intro episode.
I know. You had to keep it going.
No, that's good.
Yeah, so I think we'll end it there, folks.
We'll just cut it out after that.
Yeah, well, now you say that. Maybe not. But anyways, that's where we want to leave it, folks. We hope you enjoy this.
Yeah. Looking forward to talking to Jason, and that should be coming out shortly after this is released, and that should be a great conversation. Really looking forward to talking about Christian education. And
totally. Yeah. So until next time, stay tuned, folks. Keep having real conversations, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Good stuff.
Peace. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. To send us your feedback, email us at reformedrealtalk@gmail.com, go to our website at realtalkpodcast.ca, or follow us on social media on Facebook or Instagram at Real Talk under the handle Reformed Real Talk if you're searching for us, and leave us your comments or questions there. We look forward to your feedback as this is what helps us grow as a community and have real conversations. This show is produced by Lucas Holtfluer and Tyler Vanderwood. The music is provided by Calvin Hutton. And that's it for now, folks. Keep having real conversations. We hope you were informed and inspired by this episode. Till next time, bye-bye.